Now it's time to hear from parents who are active and passionate advocates, but not just for their kids. Keri Rodrigues is the co-founder and president of the National Parents Union, a network of 200 parent-serving advocacy organizations across the United States. And Lakisha Young is the co-founder and executive director of Oakland Reach, a parent advocacy group in California. Welcome to you both. Let me start with Lakisha. How are things in Oakland? Are kids back in schools? Are you in a hybrid situation? What does that world look like, and what are your big worries at the moment?
Sorry, at first I thought you were going to ask us about these orange skies we've been having out here.
Well, I was going to get to that in question too.
But right now in Oakland, and I think in a lot of districts in California, everything is remote primarily. The school year kicked off with virtual learning.
Right. And so now, now with remote and virtual learning, do you find people bought in, learning, I don't want to go on too much because I want to get to, Keri in a moment, but in the 1990s, I remember working for the state of New Mexico. And for the senator I worked for, the most consistent voter for Senator Bingaman was a Hispanic, single woman, head of household, 3 kids and 2 jobs. And so when you imagine that person and the stress and pressure of this time, I'm just wondering, are people in your world managed? Because I know you are their advocates as well. Do they have what they need to succeed?
Well, like I said, for our communities, it's definitely a steep curve and a struggle. I think and Keri will probably add this as well, I think that's why organizations like ours really set up infrastructures. The thing that we did as soon as COVID hit, because remember, we've been in an education crisis before we were in a health crisis. So in the spring, when schools shut down, our families were dealing with both academic and just socioeconomic chaos. Right. And as advocacy groups that are on the ground, listening to our families and building the solutions that meet the needs of our families, us as a group, and I'm a parent too. I have 3 children and I have a senior in high school. So you can imagine what she's going through. So what we ended up doing literally is building a virtual hub this summer that served over 200 students. We hired teachers. And I think what was key to what we built in that hub and what we're doing with the hub in the fall, when you start talking about the challenges of working families, multi-generational families, economic loss, is that we make sure that our families have a family liaison. So we make sure that there's someone that's connected to them, that helps them navigate this process. In the summer, we help provide stipends for families. We made sure that families had the internet access and computers that they need. And so is virtual learning challenging? It is, but we also see it as an opportunity, right? Mm-hmm. Because again, in Oakland, less than 30% of Black and brown kids were reading on grade level with in-person learning. So whereas other people may feel like, oh, this is so devastating, we see some silver linings here, because when we were running our hub in the summer, our families were next to their kids watching instruction happen live. So we have this huge opportunity for parents to really be challenging and pushing up on the quality of instruction that their kids are getting in ways that I don't think we've ever seen in education, because most of our families are, dropping their kids off and working and providing. So there are challenges. And I think we are working to, like I said, create infrastructures and supports, but there's also a lot of opportunities to innovate and kind of disrupt some of the status quo around the way that our kids have been learning, because these families want these kids to go to college. And in many scenarios, that was not the pathway we were on prior to COVID.
Do we have Keri Rodrigues? Hi, Keri. Good to see you. First time here. Great. Good to see you. I think that what Lakisha just shared is very powerful. And look, I hate to be the guy that comes in and says, there's some good that's come out of this, but that's what I just heard from Lakisha. But I'm wondering, I go back and sort of look at the parents that I know. I'm not a parent, so not my deal. But when I kind of listen to other parents that have gone this, to a certain degree, a lot of them felt they'd sort of subcontracted teaching to others, that they did their work, they did their fun, maybe they were involved, maybe they weren't, but it was more optional because they had a subcontracted operation out there. And I'd be interested from your National Parents Union perspective, whether that equation has fundamentally changed now.
Well, yeah, I would take exception with the idea that we've subcontracted. In order for our economy to work, our children have to be supervised during the day. We are the essential workers on the front line, who are going out there and making the economy run. We have created a situation where kids go to school so parents can work. We are the labor and the backbone of our communities and frankly, this country. So you can't indict parents for saying like, oh my God, we've been completely upended. Mm-hmm. This is a moment for us to transform education. I want to echo everything that Lakisha was saying. Parents have more information about how their kids were being served and frankly underserved now than ever. Mm. And frankly, they're really angry about it. We see how much interaction our kids have with our different educators. We see the quality of instruction or lack thereof. Right. And parents now have options. They know they have options. They're being presented with all of the choices in the world. If you had talked to us a year ago, the both of us, people like us are told all the time that we're not smart enough to even make the right choice as to where our kids should go to school. Now, we're the only people who are well equipped to make those choices for our families, to make those choices for our children. And we're here to tell you we've always been in that position. But the fact of the matter is, now that we are in the driver's seat, all of this is playing out in our living rooms. We have a lot to say about what this is going to look like moving forward. We have done national tracking polls with families across the country. We're going to continue to do it throughout the school year. By a 2-to-1 margin, American families tell us that they're not interested in shoving their kids back into a status quo that, frankly, we're putting kids like mine and like Lakisha's into the school to prison pipeline. It's poverty, it's incarceration and death. We're not going to stand by now that we know we have options, that the system is disrupted, to say, okay, yeah, we're just going to shove them back into the system. There's no way that's happening.
Keri, can you give me just a few more headlines from that polling you're doing? You know, how are parents feeling about the debate on whether to open schools, not schools? You know, I thought what you said was very compelling. But what are some of the other headlines in the insights you've gotten from that interaction with a large group of parents?
Well, I got to tell you, parents are pretty frustrated because instead of experts doubling down, education experts doubling down on their area of expertise, which is supposedly education, they're trying to transform themselves into being infectious disease experts, which they are not. Trying to come up with the best way to wrap our kids in plastic, instead of trying to figure out ways to make remote learning worth doing. So now we are very frustrated. I got to tell you, here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, my organization here on the ground, Massachusetts Parents United, we're sending letters today to the Secretary of Education saying, excuse me, time spent on learning is still a thing. We need to have structured learning time. The plans that you have given us around remote learning with these very ambiguous, well, maybe you'll have 2 hours a week with a teacher on Zoom, and that's going to be the only live instruction you get. We have a lot of questions about the quality of what we're getting in this moment. And frankly, the fact that, you know, we don't know what's happening. I mean, if our kids are only going to get interaction with schools and with teachers right now for 2 hours a day at max, what is happening the rest of the day? Where are all these additional resources going? Because I got to tell you, it's not coming to families to help support us in this moment. The National Parents Union stepped up, just like Lakisha's Oakland Reach stepped up. And we have been provided, we sent out $200,000 in grants directly to families and different organizations across the country to help support them in a rapid response fashion, who are putting together pandemic pods or homeschool pods, whatever the bougie new term is for it now. It's called plain old fashioned resource sharing, something that poor Black and brown folks have been doing forever to survive. But unfortunately, it's groups like us, it's little nonprofits like us that are having to step up and actually do the hard work of serving families while the system is kind of shirking its responsibility. And families aren't going to take this lying down. We're seeing unprecedented amounts of energy and people wanting to say, this can't go on this way.
Right. Lakisha, I'm very taken with what Keri just shared with us, but I'm interested in the motto of your organization, Oakland Reach, is to make the powerless parent powerful. And I'm interested in terms, whenever we do these things, I'm interested in when people are listening, what's replicable? What can they take in their communities? So what would be, we just talked about resource sharing, which has been going on in these communities, but when you think about making the powerless parent powerful, what are some of those steps that you're taking that others might learn from?
Well, again, I would say the biggest step that we're taking is building the infrastructure that we know that our families need to survive, and not just actually survive, but thrive this pandemic. What we're doing in Oakland is all about thriving, right? And so I've talked to cities across this country that are definitely interested in replicating the hub. I mean, we had the hub up and running before the word pandemic pods popped up because we needed to move quick and fast to serve our community. So for folks who are really interested in this, it really is, listening to and connecting with the organizations like ours, and Keri Rodrigues is on the floor. We've been doing this work. We've been supporting our families. So it's not a surprise that when a pandemic hits, we jump into action and make sure that we're supporting our families. Right. So for folks who are really interested in this, obviously they can reach out to me. I'm having conversations with folks about what this looks like. But I will say this, and I think this is key. Solutions need to be built with our communities and not to and for our communities, right? So people, I have too many of the folks who would be doing it to and for our families reaching out, and not enough folks who this would be done with, who actually are close to the families and have the ear of the families, right? I think that's what makes it most successful, is that we are, someone I trust a lot and respect a lot always says, right, like, we are the people we serve, right? And right, we know our history and we know what we're trying to change and shift. Right. So I think for folks who want to do this across the country, something like the virtual hub, they need to reach out to me. And I will add this last part, which is when we moved into the fall, we actually surveyed a few hundred of our families again to kind of understand what could be shifting with them in terms of work and things of that nature, and that they need in-person support. And right, I want to really stress in Oakland, and again, this is different across the country, that our families are like, no way. I mean, the Black and Latino communities are really disproportionately impacted by COVID. Right. They are concerned and they are figuring out ways to stay at home. So the reason why we are continuing to run our programming and do our work virtually is because at least 87 or 88% of our families have said, we're not interested in in-person learning right now. So again, whatever solutions are built, make sure that they are coming directly from the needs of families and what they're saying. If our families had said something different, then we would have stepped back and thought about it. But our families are putting health first. They're putting health first alongside with education. And that's why, to Keri's point, we need people doubling down on making sure virtual learning is as amazing as it can be, because it can be. There's kids that's been in virtual learning this whole time. So it's not like a new concept. But listen to families, build the solutions that meet their needs.
Thank you.
And if you have questions about our hub, they can totally reach out to us at hub@oaklandreach.org.
Great, Lakisha, thank you. And just, Keri, just really fast, I'm interested in what, when you look at the kind of education world and you look at what will remain after this time of crisis, what are the most important institutional arrangements that you think we need to maintain when we're in a post-pandemic education era? Just really quick.
Well, we need to decide whether or not we want to have transactional relationships with parents, or we want to have transformative relationships with parents. I am not an empowered parent. I am a parent who has stepped into her power. And I'm here to tell you that there are pockets of parent power across this nation where parents are organizing. I don't parachute in. Our organizations, 200 across the country and growing. These are not organizations we created. These are just folks that are networked and showing solidarity. We are all across the country. We are not interested in just being box checked. If you really want to forge a solid relationship because you need us in this moment, treat us with respect. We are your peers. We have the critical context you need to actually make sure we get outcomes done for kids. It's time to have a real conversation.
Well, Keri Rodrigues, president of the National Parents Union, and Lakisha Young, co-founder and executive director of Oakland Reach. Thank you so much for sharing your stories and perspectives on such an important topic. I really appreciate you both. Thank you.